to The Real Tea with T3. I'm your host, Tisha Harris, the team leader of Texas Trio Team, and I have an awesome counterpart with us today,
Michelle Duty.
And so we are actually celebrating something really special today, MD.
What?
It is our 50th episode of The Real Tea. So we have an amazing guest that's returning with us. So who are you and what's kept you busy since we saw you last?
My name is Doug Gibson. Thank you so much for having me. I am the Vice President of Sales for a financial services company in Houston, but of course we operate in all 50 states today. I am in charge of product acquisition, development, and sales for our firm. So I handle all aspects of financial services, planning, and client acquisition. I am curious, since it is the first or the 50th episode, what was I on the original recording?
Numero uno.
I was okay. So 1 in 50. I love it.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to have you back.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Those are good odds. You should go invest in something today.
It would be like every other day for me because that's essentially what I do for a living. So investing is definitely part of what I will be doing as soon as we wrap.
Of course.
Yeah. So, it is so bizarre. After we had you on the first episode, Michelle wasn't on that episode with us, but afterward she was like, wait a second, how do you know Doug Gibson? And so it was a strange connection that your family's like intertwined with one another. And I think it is a small world after all. And so have you ever noticed that, like, as far as business connections, that you meet somebody and then you have that relationship, somehow it's all intertwined?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We have known each other since, his mom and dad and I have been friends since 2000. So about 25 years.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's always like that 6th degree of Kevin Bacon that they always say, like, especially in social media, now that we're all connected for constantly across all avenues for everybody. So, I mean, you always know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
That knows something about it.
There you go. But it's very confined usually to, the real estate or financial services or business ownership. But when those kind of connect from outside circles, it's always interesting. But yeah, it was funny when we saw each other this morning. We said, "Oh, I didn't know you were going to be here," and I didn't. So it was great to catch up.
Well, and then your wife practices real estate sometimes. I'm not sure if that's still true, but she and I worked a transaction together. We sold your granddaughter, I think, the house they live in now. So I was the listing agent.
Your granddaughter?
Yeah, don't
not
make me
granddaughter. I'm so sorry. Your daughter,
please.
Teresa's granddaughter.
I already feel bad.
Well, it would be my granddaughter, but anyways, so you're quite a bit younger than me, I think. I'm not sure what the age difference is, but
I'll say it. I'm 45, but I won't let you say yours because that's a taboo. So please don't tell everybody your age.
He's 21.
But I am happy to say I have earned every bit of 45, but some days I feel like 65.
Yeah.
Sure.
So anyways, we ended up working a transaction together also. So it's been multiple bump-ins professionally. It's pretty cool.
Why do you think like that? Like, how do you think that happens? Like, because, this is like outside of the Houston market. This isn't where we are right now is a smaller town, but like where you guys have the connection. And I mean, like, we're talking millions of people. Like, that's really bizarre that the universe just keeps bringing you guys somehow together.
Oh, absolutely. Well, his mom is near and dear to my heart.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So let's dive into just business overall. Like, how long have you been doing this?
19 years. 19 years. So
if you could look back at Doug 19 years ago, what lessons would you tell Doug at 19 years ago as to, like, these are the keys that you're going to need for success in business?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing that comes to mind is hard work, for sure. And that's really something that I have always tried to do. And it was funny, you never really know what kind of values your kids are getting. And so I was having a conversation with my 28-year-old daughter, who is now a business owner herself, so very proud and successful and kind of charting her own path. And she was in a meeting with me, and we were talking to one of her prospective clients. And, she just out of the blue said, well, my dad has always been a hard worker, and he worked all through the pandemic, never took any days off. He works sick, he works holidays. So, I mean, obviously I know that I do that, but to see your kids recognize that, I think was one of those proud papa moments. I never told her, and if she's hearing this, this is going to be the first time she's going to hear me tell this story. But it was a very emotional, heartwarming thing for me, because it was, again, nothing that I told them. I didn't say, hey, make sure you work hard, but they picked up a little bit on it by example. So, when I started my career, just right out of college, obviously didn't know anything, but I liked real estate and I liked financial services. I didn't know which one I was going to do, so I tried to ride two horses, and it ended up gravitating more towards financial services just because of the business model. But I loved real estate. I couldn't get rid of my passion for real estate, so I work it into everything that I do professionally, which is how you and I were connected, because I just wanted to stay focused on real estate. And if you look at successful people and if you look at their wealth, a majority of it is in businesses and real estate. And so it's really fit well. I almost didn't have to leave the real estate aspect aside, although I don't do it like you both do it. I don't sell properties, but it is such a big part of what I do for a living. And so it's involved in the planning. So all that to say, the things that I would probably tell myself early is, hard work, but really be focused on goals. I always, and still to this day, struggle with goals, because I never know if they're too far out there, or if they're too short-sighted, or if they're not achievable. I would really try and tell myself to be more focused on having the goals and having a written plan and sticking to it 2, 3, 5, and 10 years out, because now I'm at a point 20 years into my career where I should have had those things, and I should have been achieving certain benchmarks and milestones along the way. And so I'm really now, for the first time, training myself how to be more goal oriented. So hard work and write your goals. Understand your goals, create goals that are short term, medium term, and long term, and then create systems and processes in place to help you achieve those goals.
That's incredible. And so I'm curious though, like after doing this for a while, being in business is like, sometimes it can be really difficult to project 5, 10 years down the road, or even if you do that 1 year model of this is my big goal for the year and you achieve it, to think bigger than that. Like, so do you have any like exercises that you do, or is it just kind of like you see things maybe that other people are doing, or maybe things that you're like, oh, I want to add that to the list? Like it just inspires you in some sort of way. Like, how do you work through that process?
Well, so there's a lot. And the last word that you just said was process. And so I think that's the key, because it's great to have a goal, and we all should do that, and we all should write it. I mean, there's a study out of Harvard that says the people that wrote their goals ultimately were more successful. And there's a bunch of income thresholds. I won't bore you with what the study says. But where I've tried to focus is, now that I've done better at actually putting my goals, but now I'm developing a process for each of them. And AI has been a big part of that, to be able to help accomplish those things where it would have taken a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of energy to do that, where you can do it now very easily with AI. It's like having, your own personal team of PhDs, sitting beside you, that you can delegate a task to them and say, hey, go create a process that's going to outline the strategy for me to sell 10 homes in the next 6 months. And then it'll come out with some output, and you can further refine it to say, okay, how do I create a marketing campaign to highlight the strengths that I have as a business owner, or as a real estate agent, or a financial advisor, to accomplish those goals. So you can really not only create the goal, but now you have a process and a roadmap to be able to do it, leveraging all the capabilities that are out there to you, that you have at your disposal to help you do it.
100%. And I love that, I love AI and like working with it. But I think it's so interesting that people don't understand, like maybe they're just now getting ChatGPT, or maybe they're just now working with Grok. is like sometimes people may feel like they're behind, but the thing we have to remember is it's so new. Like there's going to be so much innovation that's going to happen, and the growth model that will happen along the way is like it's never too late. But it's working through the search engine model that we've been ingrained with of Google and, DuckDuckGo, whatever search engine that looks like. And like you're actually prompting it in like long format to get better clarity on what you're actually looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I battle with this internally because even though you have all these wonderful resources at your disposal, I feel like that there's some times where I want to do things myself too. Just, if I let Chat GPT or Grok write all my emails, I feel like maybe I should be developing my own proper methods
Right.
and skill sets internally to be able to do that. So it is definitely an interesting dynamic because the capabilities of AI are so unbelievable. I mean, you can do literally anything you want. I mean, I was working with my son who's preparing for the SAT, and we mapped out a whole prep course, and we mapped out the questions and answer series where it was going to start to ask you questions. And 10 years ago, this was something that you had to pay a professional to be able to help your kid prepare for exams, that now you can do it in your own living room. So again, the capabilities are endless, but I, kind of struggle with, look, I want to use it for certain applications, but there are certain things where I want to make sure that I'm staying mentally sharp too, and not just delegate everything in my life for ChatGPT, because you literally could.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we were just talking about this yesterday, is like sometimes when you're a new business owner, or maybe you've been doing it a while and you're going through the hurdles of the ups and the downs, is like financial burdens or not burdens per se, but like expenses can get high, especially when there's always the new and exciting thing to dive into. And do you mind sharing what you found like as an amazing tool in ChatGPT or AI?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm pretty new to the AI world. And honestly, it scares me a little bit because it can take your job, right? Like it just is a little bit scary. I mean, I used it to stage rooms in a home. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about. Yes. And so I used to pay $35 per photo to virtually stage a room. And I was able to stage the rooms beautifully, loved it. I can, tell it what style and, just so many details. And it did it perfectly. But at the same time, that kind of goes back into it could take your job, because there was somebody who did that for $35 a photo and now I don't need them anymore. So anyways, it's a little bit scary, and I agree with you. I want to like make sure that, mm, I don't trust AI to do contracts and, things like that. I think that there's a line that needs to be drawn in that, but fantastic for staging photos.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some jobs that are definitely going to have to be shifted and repositioned. But I think, sales, which we all share in common, in being able to develop a personal connection with someone, obviously is key to anything that you're going to do. And so I think, that'll be, not that it'll never go to AI, but I think it'll be the last thing to go for sure, because you just can't replace the emotions and the connections and the true personal relationships that you have with people.
Agreed.
You may be able to delegate the staging of the properties, or how you do the open houses, or in my world, the analysis of tax returns, or a business plan or an operating agreement, those kind of things. But I think your connection with the client and the ability to sit down with them over a cup of coffee and just be able to connect with them and build a rapport and a level of trust. I think it would be very difficult for AI to replace any of that,
Agreed.
at least with any high degree of trust. I mean, when you look someone in the eye and you can really get to know them, and their family, and you're now invited to family events, which I'm sure you're invited to events for some of your past clients and they've become friends. Those are things that I think would be very difficult to replace.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would love for it to use all of the things that used to take me hours of administrative tasks to be able to do. I will happily give all of those things so to AI.
Absolutely. Well, and it goes back to what you were saying about personalizing the emails. That matters. AI can't do that. AI can't, ask how their wife's feeling because, they were sick or whatever. I don't
Right.
think. But, anyways, yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. And so diving into, like, you were talking about systems and processes, that's something that, like, I hear business owners talk about all the time is I want to have the systems, I want to have the organization, I want to do it. But don't you think it's kind of like your business plan, like you were the concept that you were saying is like you may have a really big goal that encompasses maybe 20 different things, but you have to zone in on the one thing to get you to the number two, right? Same goes for systems. Like, don't you think that you need to have like a detailed outline of what systems you actually want? Because that's a very broad term, as I want systems. Systems for what? Like, do you struggle with like navigating what systems, or is it just you've honed in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, for sure. I mean, having the ability to create a system is very good, but it's almost like a sounding board. I think when you get into it in the exercise, to be able to really talk through your business. I mean, when I use AI, my prompts are 2 pages. I mean, so it's really about asking the right questions, honing down on the right answers, and then refining it ultimately to get what you want. And then I think another aspect is putting the right people in key places. As a business owner, especially privately held businesses that we work with, these are founder led shops that have been doing these things for 25, 30, 40 years. And so they've been used to being HR. They've been used to being sales. They've been used to being, marketing. So they've done all of these things. And so, you can leverage AI to be able to help develop some of those things. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, you're going to have people, and you're going to have to try and teach delegation. And so part of our process and what we do is to really add clarity and insight from a financial perspective to our business owners to help them understand why they're making the decisions that they're making and the impact that those decisions are having on cash flow and lifestyle. And then they can then take that information and use it to make the decisions that ultimately have the desired impact. So it's a process, but then you really ultimately follow up probably with people, and then being able to delegate and outline responsibilities in a more specific manner so that you can accomplish the goal that you have. And then through working with a strategic consultant and tax advisor like me, you can make sure that those have the impact that you want them to have. Again, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Is this the right decision? Does it have the impact that I want it to have? And why am I making the decision that I'm making so that I can be confident that I'm making the right one?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so whenever you are in your day to day, like you've put little systems in place, you've delegated the work, but then sometimes life happens and it makes it really difficult. Like it knocks you off
Like an
kilter.
AC going out?
That's exactly where I was going with that. It's like whenever your mindset or like what you had planned for the day or what you had planned for your business, like completely gets diverted and knocked off track. Like, what are some things that you've noticed or like you've implemented to maintain success in and a positive mindset when you go out and to do your work?
Well, I think the mindset is the key. And it's almost like you have to go into everything to understand that life happens. And even though you have everything mapped out, I'm a big routine guy. So, I mean, I do the same thing in the same way, typically, in the same fashion that we all do it, right? And so anything that causes me to deviate from my normal routine does not make me happy. And so, having the ability to, I see a finger being pointed over.
Oh, y'all are both very alike in that way, gotta
Yeah.
say.
So
Little
now
bit
I've just trained
perfectionist.
myself to know that that's going to happen, and those things are going to come up. And so having the ability to stay nimble and deal with it and understand that those things are going to happen. It's hard to put a system in place for an unknown. So I just really try and prepare mentally. And then, there are times where I have to take a step back and say, okay, let's just relax. Let's take 10 minutes, do the meditation exercise, do the breathing exercise, whatever it is you need to do to kind of refocus and say, okay, I'm going to have to move in this direction. And so, it's hard to have a process again for something that you don't know what to expect. But I think you can also go into it and knowing that this is the direction that I think I'm going to go, but I'm also going to be nimble enough and flexible enough to be able to pivot if and when ultimately life happens, and it will.
Do you remember the book, like whenever you're pregnant, like that it was like what to expect when you're expecting?
Yes.
We need that for real estate agents and business owners. It's like what to expect whenever you dive in.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that we'd have a whole lot more signing on for real estate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a number of times where you've called me and we've talked about clients and then, I won't get into the details, but then you called back and said, yeah, what we talked about last week, it's changed. So I need to completely undo everything that we talked about last week.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And that happens just with our clients as well, is like you go in with expectations. But one of my favorite quotes is like conflict arises when expectations differ. And so it's not so much that it takes two to tango. Like whenever it comes to building relationships with people in the business world or with your clients, is like you have to be transparent, especially with some of your largest investments and like really what the goal is. But it can be, it can cause issues for building those client relationships. Like if people aren't being honest and transparent from the get-go, and that can be from either side.
I mean, so one of the things that comes to mind as you're talking is, kind of a scenario that comes up more often than not when I'm dealing with clients and prospective customers. Again, in financial services, we can talk about what they're doing and their current circumstances and their current situation. And then, when they start to involve people with professional capabilities and resources that are very broad, there are a number of ways that I can help that individual. And so we'll just, take some side-by-side comparisons and say, look, here's your current path and here's what you're doing today. Here's what it looks like if we make some changes and we do some adjustments. And, we can get someone to say, okay, this path is better and this path makes more sense. And what you're showing me, I think would add value, but there's a lot of times where they struggle to make the decision. So, typically when I'll sit down with clients and I'll say, look, I'm going to show you some things that are better. I'm going to show you some areas that we can improve. But let me tell you what the biggest problem that we're going to have to deal with today. And that's just the concept of change. Because individually, people get comfortable with doing what they're doing. They get comfortable with the same results. And the pain of changing is potentially greater than the impact of whatever you would be recommending will have on their portfolio or on their financial circumstances. So I try and spend some time, at least up front, in just dealing with the concept of change. And let's deal with that first, and then understand that I'm going to show you something that's going to make more sense, that's going to be financially advantageous. I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you how much. But the biggest challenge that you're going to have is just pulling the trigger on moving from A to B, right? It's not necessarily about the numbers and the results. We've just got to deal with the prospect of change first. And once you can get someone comfortable with that, then you can move on to the numbers and the data behind whatever you're talking about.
Do you see that as a generational thing? Do you have a harder time with older people in change than you do with the younger generation?
You bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult for everybody, but it's definitely more difficult for the older generation.
Yeah.
I had a mentor that said, he makes decisions. If it's not a yes or not a no, it's a no. Right. So if he's got any uncertainty at all, his default is no. And I think that's kind of the mentality of everybody to a certain extent. And so, having, again, that understanding going in, let's deal with that first. Right. Let's help you figure out how to cope with change of any kind. And once you can kind of overcome that, it's pretty easy, right? Can I add value or can I not add value? And then the decision really is already made.
Yeah.
So what about the communication styles between like different generations? Like, are you noticing that there's a drastic difference between like how you're delivering information in comparison to what you did maybe 19 years ago?
Well, I mean, I definitely try to adapt it to whoever I'm talking to. right, to the specific audience in any given circumstance. I try and be well researched. I know who I'm talking to. I know what they like. Social media today makes that very easy. You can see where they went to college. You can see what they do for fun. So, I mean, you try and have that level of understanding.
So you're a stalker also.
Yeah, you have to in business, right? You have to know your audience. You have to know what their likes and their dislikes are. Again, that just helps. That helps relate,
Absolutely.
but it also helps you, better position yourself with rapport to be able to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. Older people still like a face-to-face interaction. So, I think that's probably, to your point, the generational thing. But, in the world today, especially after 2020, we all had to learn how to do Zoom and work from home and do those things. I'm still an office junkie, so I get myself to the office all the time, every day, and I work a lot. So, but you still have to adapt and you have to kind of meet people where they are. I want it to be as easy as possible to do business with me. If that's face to face, I can come to you. You can come to our office, whatever is easiest. Mm-hmm. But again, you just adapt and you kind of do what it makes sense to do for that particular individual in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking projections, maybe just for the next couple years, like what are the big changes we see big changes with our real estate industry and like companies doing acquisitions of major companies of brokerages, or maybe a rule changes. And so we have to have different communications with our clients that probably should have been taking place like the whole time anyways. Like there's big changes in our industry. So what about your industry? What are some major changes that you've noticed that you want to maybe inform just the general public about to be informed?
Well, typically what happens in really any business is, especially in a high rate environment, the smaller business, the cost of capital, the cost of everything is greater. If you're a young and growing business, you're reliant on outside money, outside sources, outside funding, whether that's venture capital, private equity, or loans from banks. So, just a real world example, Amazon can get a loan from JP Morgan at a much lower rate than a small startup company would. So in a high rate environment, it's difficult for smaller companies to survive. And so we've been in this period in the last 4 or 5 years as rates started to rise to the levels that they are today. The larger companies have had healthy cash flow, have had healthy balance sheets. They've been able to acquire smaller businesses. So we're in a real situation where the businesses of the largest companies have just gotten bigger. And so the larger real estate firms have gobbled up some small ones. The same thing has happened across financial services, across manufacturing, across all industries. We're starting to see rates come down. Smaller businesses are becoming profitable. If you just want to talk a boring fact, about half the companies that trade on a small to mid cap, it's called the Russell 1000 index, half of those companies are not profitable. So they're reliant on outside funding and outside capital. And when rates are high, their balance sheets don't look good. But there's value in the businesses, so the bigger companies are acquiring them. And that's not a real estate thing. That's not an industry specific thing. It's happening across the board. So the bigger companies have been able to take advantage of the environment and really make themselves even bigger. So I think that's what we're going to continue to see in business.
Do you think that that's a problem?
It's a double-edged sword, right? So, it's a blessing and a curse. Obviously, you have these businesses that are able to command very high multiples. You're starting to see more IPOs. You're starting to see more mergers and acquisitions in the last couple of years as rates have started to indicate that they're going down. So I think you're going to see more of that. So, you're in a circumstance where, the bigger companies are swallowing up the smaller companies, but a lot of times, take Berkshire Hathaway, for example, their model is to acquire the business and they now own it, but they acquire teams with management that's strong and solid and in place, and they don't change a thing. So Berkshire doesn't come in and change the operations of the company. And I think that's what we're starting to see a lot more. It's very common practice for the owner of that business to be required to stay on for 3 to 5 years to continue to ensure, business operations, client retention, all of those things. So I think you do have, the blessing of you're still kind of the small business operation. You get a healthy cash flow injection, which is needed to survive in certain times. but then you also get the benefit of having the existing management team in place. There's very few occasions where, at least these days, they're coming in and they're wiping out, the business operations and they're firing everybody. So it really can be a good business model. So certainly there's outliers in either occasion, but I think the most successful and the most favorable model is to kind of keep the business as it is. I understand value. Maybe I can get a little better deal today because of where the market and the environment is, but the business is ultimately going to survive because it does something that people want. It provides a service, it provides a product, it manufactures something, and it is something that people do want to buy, which is what's made it healthy.
Perfect. But I'm totally going to go down a rabbit hole here, and I'm not well versed enough, and so I would love your feedback on it. I was watching like a podcast that was been a while back, and it was a girl named Tiffany. I don't know her last name, but she's like big on TikTok, and she was talking about like how your large businesses, like I'm just going to throw out like it was Big Lots, like they were a part of like leasing space like inside shopping centers, and then like people were acquiring like acquisitions were taking place, and so the land that the property was on was out, it was outperforming, like not outperforming, it was out, like the expenses were so high with all of the land lease payments. There was another girl that I just watched, it was actually, I don't think she's a real estate agent, I looked her up, but she was talking about in Austin, because the cost of homes are so high, you could buy these particular homes that were like $93,000, but you didn't see inside the loophole that the land, it was a land lease that you were buying this home on. And so the land lease had the price for the land was $799,000. And so you're paying like $2,000 for the lease payment of the land, but you think it just is the sales pitch side is like $93,000 for the house. So your payment's going to be really low. Do you have any insight into anything that I just threw out? I know it was like a really like can of worms, but like, are you seeing that kind of across the board that these bigger businesses, these bigger companies are kind of in a sense taking advantage of people that maybe not well versed in the linguistics of things?
For sure. One of the things that's happened recently is around college campuses. The real estate historically has been less ideal because nobody wanted to live next to a college. Well, in the past couple of years, the larger companies have identified, hey, there's a real value to the land leasing these to college kids or renting to college kids. So, there's been a lot of major corporations, BlackRock, companies like that have been buying all of the rental real estate properties around college campuses because it's become big business. So yes, there's definitely some aspects of that. And obviously college kids, hopefully they have some support with parents, but at the end of the day, you don't have the type of resources that these large companies have. So, I mean, I think there is some element of that, but
I guess that's where my question was like, do you think that that's a problem? Is like, who has say and like, who has the say as to what is like you can do that to people, and like how long can that go on, like, and if you get these companies that are so huge, how do you ever break it apart, like because they have way more money, way more skin in the game than the mom and pop shop or the college kid and their parents would ever have?
I mean, I would love to give you a better answer for that, but I don't see how we can unwind.
Is it too far
or
invested?
pull that snowball back from rolling down the hill? Because you just mentioned it, these companies are too big; they have too much financial resources. I know that doesn't maybe not the answer that the audience wants to hear, but sometimes that's the truth. But I think where we're getting, you typically look at any real estate development. There's always a new neighborhood that's just a little further out, right? And so there are still deals out there and there's still values out there. It may not be, inside the loop or in metropolitan Austin or something like that, but those cities are exploding. So if you go 30, 45 minutes out to, Plano, Orlando, or those kind of areas, you can find really good values. And then 5, 10, 15 years out, those are the new hot areas. We talked about opportunity zones on the last time. That's really what that whole program is about. And so there's a lot of those areas that are now really, really attractive communities that people who did go a little bit further out, maybe the first time, found a tremendous value.
Yeah, I'm sorry I went down like a rabbit hole there. I'm just generally curious. It's like we just sell real estate here in this small little town. I'm just curious. Like, but
Well, I think you were talking real estate, though. I mean, what you were saying is what's contributed to our housing crisis.
yeah, well,
mean-
and that's what I'm like. I guess what I'm curious of is like with all the major changes that are taking place that you see day in and day out. Like, what is the light at the end of the tunnel that you kind of see as a positive outlook for maybe those? It seems like it's so difficult for maybe like the 20 to 30-year-old like individuals to buy homes like as they're getting out of college because they're in so much student debt, or maybe they just the cost of living is so high. It's just like what changes in a positive light would you like could you share that like it was like I know it sucks maybe right now, but it's getting better or easing up a little bit?
So, I mean, the answer to normally these kind of significant circumstances is it's never just one thing. So, I mean, we had a circumstance where housing prices rose really high, really fast. Where the challenge was is that incomes did not. We're finally getting to a point now where it's not at the same level that housing has increased, but incomes are starting to increase to a level to where eventually those are going to become more in line. Unfortunately, in today's world, once prices increase, they rarely go back down, with the exception of maybe gas or, a commodity or something like that. But once you rise prices to a certain level, the Fed will state their desired inflation target is 2%. That just means 2% higher than it was last quarter, the last time that we measured. So it's already, 8, 10, 15, 20, 30% from what it was 4 years ago. So just to get to a quote unquote normal rate environment means the cost consistently increases by 2%. So it never goes back down. You're not going to see a reduction, but what you can see, again, with the adoption of AI and some technical, skill set development, more targeted specific education, there's more businesses being started today than ever before. There's more money, or there's more ability to make money, create wealth out of nothing, with things like podcasting and, an Amazon business or a product development, whatever that is. You have a lot more of those opportunities today. So while cost and the price of things is the problem and is always going to be a problem, I think the hope that we do have and the light at the end of the tunnel is, one, incomes are increasing. So if we can get incomes to a level to where the average person can afford a home or can afford to live and afford cost of living, that would be the first thing. And the second thing is taxes. We've got some pretty good tax breaks. So having the ability to reduce taxes is a big wealth creator. So again, you're going to get to a circumstance where wealth is going to start being created and incomes are going to start to increase to a level that it's not necessarily where prices are coming down to meet you today, but eventually those two will kind of collide. And I think we will get some better results when those two things happen.
That was inspirational.
It was.
Did that give you? I didn't know. Thank you.
Let's go buy some
I
houses.
hope that was a more positive. Yeah, buy some houses. I hope that was a more positive maybe answer, but not necessarily the rosiest picture, but I think it's probably what you can expect to see.
It's kind of like, which I know that we don't really, but as like the news and like all the negative stuff that we get like inundated with on a day-to-day basis. And then you get on social media and it kind of boxes the same exact thing. It doesn't really matter what platform you're on. And so you can kind of be just overwhelmed with just the noise. And so same goes like when they say things on what's going on in the real estate market, when it may not really be making, that's not really what's happening in the day-to-day, like main street of like where you live. And so if you get in touch with a professional that can keep you informed of exactly what's going on in your neighborhood or what's going on in your, in your city, your town. Same thing goes for you probably. It's just like people are screaming the headlines of, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad. And that's why we definitely wanted to have you back to be like, kind of put some grounding into like, no, like these, you do still have options. It's not doom and gloom every day.
Well, it's not always doom and gloom. And I think we're almost in, to your point, the news and social media, we're in an environment where they're kind of trying to outduel each other for the most outlandish, bombastic things because that's what's going to draw the eyes and that's what's going to draw the attention.
That's what pays for clicks and ads.
Because that's what pays for clicks. So it's again that double-edged sword where that's how you get the income and that's how you can make the money and bring in the eyes. But it almost now that's where the new bar is. And the only way to get there for the next person is to say something crazier and more outlandish and more bombastic. So again, social media and AI and in the news, they have some very positive qualities, but they have also some, the negative impacts in things like that. So, just telling people the honest truth without trying to, generate clicks is where I try to fit. And then when you have someone that is founded and grounded in data and can show someone the rationale and the why, I think that's what makes our business successful and what I do a little bit easier because it's not concept. It is real world practice and we can show the value and we can show it side by side. Here's what life looks like if you don't work with us. Here's what life looks like if you do. Which picture do you like better, right?
Yeah.
We're not trying to sell an idea or something that's out there. So when I work with clients, I try and, say, look, we're going to show you a bunch of different things and we're going to talk about a number of different things. All of the strategies and the planning that we discuss when we show it to you, it's as much for me to help you, but it's you to keep me accountable. Because if I ever show you something or we talk about something and the numbers look worse, you're going to tell me, why are you bringing this to me? And why would I do this? So we have to be accountable to that. So again, in today's world where we're trying to outclick and outcompete each other for eyes and attention, I wish I could get more of it. But in my world, I try and stick with reality and fact and, really show people the benefit with data backed experience.
Your TikTok does a really good job of that.
Well, thank you. And it's funny, you always get all the data on that and you can see who's viewing what. And, I had a conversation with somebody this past weekend who was, fortunate enough to have been one of the few people that saw my social media posts. I post very rarely anything that's not data-driven, financial related.
Agreed.
Every now and again, I'll throw an opinion in there about something political, and the numbers of viewers and likes and responses and feedback is, 25 to 30 times higher on those than it is on the stuff that I post normally financially. And so I was, talking to this guy, I was like, look, if I really wanted to get clicks and eyeballs and, all of the viewership, I could do it very easily by saying controversial political things and go that route. But again, I just, I want to give real world financial data that maybe applies to people's experiences day to day. The audience is more limited. I think we should have a lot more focus and attention on our money than we are on what's happening in the political world. But again, that's kind of where we get back to social media and in the news, and that's where everything is driven. So, it's also a way for me to communicate with clients. So I can, kind of post thoughts and things that are impacting their portfolio by posting the videos that I post. So,
well, I watch.
I appreciate
I
it.
like.
I'm so glad. Thank you. So you guys have been such great supporters, especially having me on your podcast and things like this. So I hope you've been able to get some decent.
100%. And I mean, like you were saying, like even about the AI, but it goes into social media too. It's like you have like this person that you can be like on social media, but at the end of the day, for your business, if you're interacting with customers, like you have to be authentic, put your heart into it and just maintain integrity. Like, because if you do get that point, like you're investing ad space or, you're pushing for that, and then you actually get the appointment in person or maybe on a Zoom call and that's not authentic, like you can't really project success, not living in your true self.
Well, sure, and I hope authenticity is something that's shown when I do those things. But again, I'm just trying to give facts, and I'm just trying to give information that people might find useful, but also insight into how we might be helping them. And
100%, yeah. I'm just saying for the people that are chasing like the clicks and the likes and all that stuff, like and like on social media, that it's just like when you go and you meet them in real person, you're like, that's not who they portrayed themselves to be. And I can say for a fact, like what you put on social is actually who you are. And like you just always shown up with your authentic self in a positive light.
Thank you. You guys have as well. That's why I love doing this. I hope I can come back for the 100th.
Oh, hey, Caitlin.
Line them up.
Mark your calendar.
So, if people do want to maybe start following you for financial advice or just, just your input that you give periodically on social handles, what's the best way for them to reach you or follow you?
Yeah. So on every major social media platform, typically my handle is at Doug Talks Money. So I had somebody call me the other day and say, you need to change your branding to Doug on Dough or Doug Talks Dough or something like that, because then at the start of your videos, you could say it's dough time. So, I don't know if I'm going to do that right, but it's, you're always thinking about branding and you're always thinking about marketing.
Innovation.
So how you can improve things. So definitely if anybody has an opportunity at Doug Talks Money, but feedback, I love it. So tell me, what you like, tell me what you don't like. I get more typically from what people tell me they don't like. So I'm more than happy to take any and all feedback.
Well, we are so grateful that you were able to come back for a second time for the 50th episode. It's special. They say, I think I heard Joe Rogan say at one time, like most people start and then they don't make it past the 30 days. And here we are over a year ago. So thank you for being a part of it with us. Yeah,
that's wonderful. So congratulations to you guys. That's an accomplishment and a testament to your team and the dedication that you have. This is so terrific. And I would encourage all of your clients and friends to follow this team. It's a fantastic team.
Yeah. We are so grateful that you tuned in and watched this episode with us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and you can reach out to us at texastrioteam.com. Take care and keep living your best life.